tell me when the stream's live first. Well, Howard?
Don't let her be sick.
And you are live. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason. All right. I will call the meeting to order. First on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Our flag is over there.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Since we do have some awards to do tonight, we'll look to add that to the agenda, but I won't be looking for a motion for that until we see exactly how the timing works out. We're waiting for a couple of people, so we'll add that when we get there. So the first thing we have, I guess, is the return to school plan for pool testing, which is kind of a big subject, so we might interrupt if our awardees are ready to go when we get there. But want to start with that?
Sure. Michelle, I don't know if you can hear me, if you're there.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm here.
Thank you very much. So I would like to say that this presentation is not just going to be about pool testing. I want for folks to understand that there's an educational value to why we're doing what we're doing. It's not just because it's one mitigation strategy that is going to decide everything we do, kind of thing. So we said this on a regular basis. Change is the only constant, and this keeps happening to us this year. We change all the time with everything, including Mr. Bell's class night, going from the auditorium out on the football field, including this evening, which is a wonderful change to have all of you here because of your accomplishments so that we can recognize you. So it's been a year of change, and pool testing is another change that has been brought to us fairly recently. So the primary goal, we heard very clear from the board, to have all students and all staff safely back full-time in-person teaching and learning 5 days a week next year. Time out.
All right.
Here we go.
All right, well, guess we'll postpone that for a moment. So I guess what we need is a motion to add to the agenda recognition for some state title athletes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from John, second from Earl. All right, all in favor of adding to the agenda? All right, it's unanimous. All right, well, we have some wonderful athletes to recognize tonight for their accomplishments in track, outdoor track for the spring season. And I think we could start by I think the coach has a little bit to say about these girls and
Coaches.
Yes, how many coaches do we have?
Two.
Oh, two? Okay.
There's the camera, so yeah.
All right.
Right up front is great.
Brother seen sitting in the corner, okay.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt for a second? Michelle, can you stop presenting for a second so we can actually see the attendees? Thank you.
First, thanks for adding this to your already busy evening. I know that there's a lot going on this time of year with budgets and all that jazz. So we're recognizing 3 state champion athletes, 3 young ladies who have been at the core of the success of Winslow High School track for a number of years, starting in middle school all the way up to where we are today as seniors. The first is Denali Norris. So I'm gonna give you, I have lots of stats, it's just kind of my jam. Actually what I went to college for originally. So as a freshman, Denali came to us with lots of talent. Obviously she grew over the years, but I'm just gonna give you their season bests from freshman year kind of to where they got at the state meet just recently. So as a freshman, Denali ran the 300 hurdles in 52 seconds and 59 hundredths of a second. And then as a freshman, she ran, as a sophomore, she ran it in 50.03, also the 300 hurdles. She was at 16th as a freshman in Class B, 7th as a sophomore in Class B. As a junior, obviously we didn't run because of COVID. And then this year, senior year, she ran a 48.17. To put that into perspective, she took basically 6.5 stride lengths, and now there's hurdles there too. So you put all that in perspective, it's quite an accomplishment. Other things that she has done since, in addition to that, she's also run the 100 hurdles as a freshman. She ran in 18.04, as a sophomore in 17.84, and finally as a senior in 16.88. Again, a phenomenal feat. There are 8 hurdles to clear along the way. And then finally, she started javelin this year. She threw, the very first time she threw in competition, she threw 74 feet, 3.5 inches. And at the state meet, it was pretty cool to watch. She was trailing, she was actually in 5th place before her final throw, and she does what Winslow athletes do when they show up. She threw 97 feet, 11 inches, which got her 2nd place. Other things that she has done since being here at Winslow High School, she is a 3-time state indoor KVAC champion, won the first KVAC outdoor champion for us, a state runner-up in indoor, and a state runner-up in outdoor. She also holds, she's on the 4x1 and 4x4 school record, 4x1 and 4x4 relay teams, which have school records. And above all that, she's a good student and a good kid. So if you put all of that together, plus these achievements, you kind of get a good picture of what type of young lady she is. So this award, in addition to those things, it just is kind of putting the icing on the cake. So that's what I have for tonight. I don't know if you guys want to do these one at a time, but.
I'd say that's probably best, and I don't know.
I'm gonna jump up and take.
John's gonna do this one because I know there's a family connection there.
I'm just gonna add one little thing, and it's true of all these girls, even if they had been before when we were Class B, obviously we're at Class C now, but they would still be getting these awards, medals, and be podium if they were in the higher class. So that's saying a lot as well. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Champion.
All right, so Olivia Tyner, her name really speaks for itself if you've ever read the newspaper. So Olivia has done pretty much anything you can ask as from a coaching perspective. She has literally run pretty much any event on the track with maybe the exception of the 100 and the 200. But
She did run the 4x1.
she did run the 4x1, which
With a good time.
with a good time, which actually placed. So lots going on. So Olivia, as a freshman, had run the 3200 at 12:22, 82, and I'll talk about that in a little bit better fashion in a minute. As a sophomore in 13:09, and as a senior, she ran it in 12:57. So it sounds like her times got worse, but you'll understand why more in a minute. She, as a freshman, she ran the 1600 in 2:28.86. Is that right? I feel like it should be a 5.
Yeah, that's real fast.
Yeah, that's real fast. That would be 800. How about 5:28.86? As a sophomore, 5:35.46, and she did not run it as a senior. And here's the reason why. As a freshman, she ran the 400 in a 1:02.49. As a sophomore, she ran it her best was a little off at 1:05.09, and this year she broke the school record running 1 minute and 12 hundredths of a second and winning her first state title in the 400. So it was a calculated decision based on what we saw. It was actually kind of funny the other day. She said, "Coach, I don't think I'm a sprinter." I'm like, "I'm pretty sure Coach Burke does sprinting with you every week." So she's been a sprinter the whole time, but she's also been running with the distance group because we know she can do both. She's a very integral part of who we are and what we've done. She herself has won 3 cross-country titles, 3 indoor KBAC titles, 1 outdoor KBAC title, a indoor state runner-up, and a outdoor state runner-up. Again, just a phenomenal kid, phenomenal student. Obviously, she's going to the Naval Academy, and personally will be greatly missed by this community. And we just hope, we hope you keep shooting for the stars. So, Olivia Tyner.
I'm gonna do this one, so. So I've known Olivia a long time. When she was playing youth lacrosse with my daughter and such, and her and her father and a few of us helped coach along the ways. And it hurt us a little bit when you decided to go for track in the spring versus play lacrosse, but I'd have to say you made a good choice. And over the years, you struggled with a couple injuries and other things, but I said, you're going to win one of these state titles at one of these times. Now, you cut it right to the end. Spring of your senior year, but I knew you had it in you. Obviously, with all the KDAC titles and the other accolades along the way, we saw great things in you. And it's great to be able to do this and recognize you.
I didn't know I could get
This is
it.
a great girl. Love her. She'll make us proud at the Naval Academy, which is an awesome accomplishment, and we look forward to seeing where you go in the world. So
Thank you.
thank you, Olivia.
Can I add something too? I saw her do something at a meet that was pretty special, and Coach will remember this. She ran the 3200 and then immediately within just a few minutes came back and had to run a leg of a relay and set a fantastic time after running 8 laps in a really fast time and coming back. And I just was like, I would still be laying there exhausted. As a matter of fact, I'd have to be at the hospital. And you ran a great time in your leg, and I was so amazed by that comeback.
Just good coaching, but thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to miss all of you guys.
Wow.
She's not around about lead coaching. Coach Bird is here. So, last but not least, so I have an immense connection with the Warren family, obviously with all these ladies. But this one's pretty special in a lot of regards based on numbers. So Carly Warren is the epitome of what you would call fast. Everything she does is fast. So looking at her progression through her time here at Winslow High School in triple jump, as a freshman, she was jumping 34 feet, 3 3/4 of an inch. That was 3rd in Class B as a freshman. In long jump, she didn't fare so well. We kind of ironed that out later, but she jumped 14 feet, 5 3/4 of an inch. In the 200 as a freshman, she ran 27.89, which was 8th in Class B. In the 100, she ran 13.33, which was 10th in Class B, so she only medaled in the triple jump. As a sophomore, she got a tiny bit better at triple jump. We were working on things. She jumped 34 feet, 6 3/4 inch, and she won herself her first Class B title. As in long jump, she jumped 16 feet 11. We got a little better, and did okay at states. As in the 200, she ran 27.64, which was 8th in Class B, and the 100, she ran 12.87, which was 3rd in Class B. She did not place in long jump that that distance was her best of the season. She had a hard time with a 10-minute rule, which we've worked out since then. As a senior, Carly did not lose a single event the entire season. She placed first in every event, in every meet, the entire season. That is a insane accomplishment. In triple jump, she set the school record, jumping 37 feet, 4.5 inches. There's nobody in our area in Class C or even in Class B that's anywhere close. The only girls that are close is a girl from Bangor. I think there's another girl just recently that jumped slightly better from the southern areas. In long jump, she at the state meet jumped 17 feet, 7.25 inches. The next girl was over a foot different, also winning a title. In the 100, her best of the season was 12:11, which is a school record. She ran 12:49 at the Class C meet, winning a state title. Oh, sorry, 12:49 was her best of the season. And then in the 200, she ran a 26:11, which was her best of the season, and also a school record, winning another state title. So for Carly, if you put all those into perspective, she has won, is it 5, Car? Something like that, 5 individual state titles. 6. I know that's good. Keep me on track, my friend, because there's a lot of stats here. I can go all day. I don't know if she knows this yet, but she won the Donald Matheson Award again this year for her efforts at KVAC. She's a 2-time Donald Matheson Award winner. Our track is named after Mr. Donald Matheson. It's a prestigious award for track and field. And finally, if we were to compare her results to the state, she is in the top 3 for all of her events in the state of Maine. And if you put it into the New England area, she is in the top 12 in most of her events in all of New England. So just a little perspective, and just to kind of sum up the whole thing before Carly gets her award, since Coach Burt and I have taken over the program, this is not bragging, just kind of give you guys perspective of where the program has come to where it is today. There have been 20 school records broken, 5 KVAC titles, 3 community cups, 1 state title, and 2 runner-ups. So these girls are the main reason why we do so well. It's easy when you got good kids. It really is. And we have phenomenal kids, phenomenally, and they're phenomenal in the classroom, and they're just awesome. So this night's really important to them. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you. A little stat on Carly. I checked one meet, I think it was the KVC Championships. I went back and looked at what she did in her events and compared it to the boys. She would have been on the podium against the boys
And all 4 events.
in all 4 events. Now think about that. She's a special
She
athlete.
may be the only 40-point scorer we have in school history as well, which is, yeah, she sure did. So in comparison, a kid like a person now who's a phenomenal athlete, Katie Swimming, who held a number of state records, Carly would have outscored her at the state league level. So you don't get much better than what you see here. Once in a lifetime, chance to coach. So.
Yeah, I have to say about Carly, we've done this a couple of times now, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Obviously, I've known you for a long time and had the pleasure of being assistant coach on the soccer team with my limited ability to obviously see that you were an awesome talent and athlete as a whole. And obviously that's paying off with lots of hardware. Good thing you're a good athlete because this is going to be really heavy walking around with all this hardware at graduation. But, obviously congratulations to you going to Bryant University on athletic scholarship playing soccer, which is incredible. And you represented Winslow very well over the years. Obviously, you've done well for Winslow. And in beating the records, as the coach said, there's some pretty good talent, and obviously those that you beat. I didn't neglect to say, I think I said earlier with Olivia, I mean, beating Olivia Vayu's record, for example. Obviously incredible talent, those of us who remember when she ran. But yeah, you guys have been outstanding. So you'll be missed. We wish you well at Brian. And Coach, you got some work to do to repeat next year.
We got some work. We graduated almost 200 points in 2 seasons, so.
Tough running shoes to fill with this bunch. So. But anyway, congratulations, and we wish you well, and you can wear all these at graduation if you've got the strength to do it. I know you do.
Yeah.
So, we got the whole bunch. That's incredible.
Thank you.
Congratulations. All right, well, that's fun. So,
You guys can stay for a couple hours if you'd like. Feel free to go.
That's tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much, folks.
John, congratulations. What's that?
You mean Denali?
Yeah,
LaSalle.
so Denali, you going to LaSalle?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Very good, congratulations.
Great job, great
Who's there?
job.
Goodwin, right?
Yeah.
Cam Goodwin is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'll have to talk to him about that.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
great. Excellent. What are you going to major in?
I'm majoring in entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Great.
Good school for that.
Yeah.
Great
And
school for it.
They have like fashion things there, so it's about, yeah.
She's gonna be the next big fashion designer, don't worry.
Well, good.
Hey, that's my superlative.
Some of us need all help we can get, so, you know. Thank you.
Great kids dressing up by wearing a sticker. That may not be.
Excellent.
Great kids on top of awards.
All right, Peter, you have a hard act to follow now.
This is a tough act to follow. I'm not sure. There's any comparison.
It's almost the same.
Okay. So just to go over, we just discussed the primary goal to get our students back in. So we still have the CDC Safety Guidelines that we need to deal with. Social distancing is still a big piece. So there are two components to that, the 3 feet of space between students in the classroom and the 6 feet of space while eating because they take their mask off. That's still very much problematic for us. And so there are all types of things that you can do in order to mitigate this. Things such as buying or renting portable units, building to increase, continuing the hybrid mode because you can't get everybody in there, or participate in this pool testing option that has become available to us. And basically, it's a mitigation program that allows us to bring all of our kids back to school for in-person learning, and it's relaxing the 3-foot distancing requirement. So some details about it, and with my eyes right now, and that coloring, I'm having a tough time, so hang on just 1 second. Just come prepare. And this is where it gets important. So if you start talking about details, this is a strategy that allows for early identification and isolation of people with the disease. We'll talk more about that as we get into the presentation. But it is another tool in our toolbox to keep everyone safe, and that's extremely important for people to know. It limits the number of people who are infected, the number of people who might have to quarantine. That's crucial, and I'll try to say that in English a little bit later, because parents really need to understand what that means. I think once parents understand that, I think the number of parents who are going to want their students to participate in pool testing is going to rise significantly. School units that participate in this program with at least 30% of school staff and students getting tested can relax the 3-foot requirement. Basically, that is our ticket to get everybody back into school, relaxing the 3-foot requirement, as long as we have 30% of our school and staff in each of the buildings agreeing to do this. Now, we've surveyed the parents, we've surveyed the staff. The results of our survey indicate that we do have 30% of the individuals who responded agreeing to do this. If we had more than 30%, that's even better. The higher that percentage, the safer we're going to be, and the better this is going to work. So it's not just a number. It really is something that could make a difference as a mitigation strategy. There's no vaccine authorized for children under the age of 12 yet. Don't know if that's going to happen over the course of the summer. So pool testing is going to be extremely important, especially at the elementary grades. All kinds of things may happen between now and fall with junior high and high school. We know that students are being vaccinated. And speaking with the nurse today, I think she said 26% of our students, Chad, maybe, have been vaccinated that she's aware of right now, and more are pending. We are running a vaccination clinic this summer. We don't have a lot of kids signed up, but if you have at least 10, the state says run it. We have 7 right now. So the more people we can encourage to get vaccinated, the better off we're going to be when we get into the next year. So, what does this thing look like? I had a lot of questions when we first sent this out. A lot of people were concerned that this was an invasive test where you take the long and shove it up to somebody's brain, wiggle it around, causes extreme pain. A lot of people thought that's what we were talking about because that's all they kept showing on TV. This, you can see what's happening. The student does it to themselves with a swab, 3 times around one nasal, 3 times around another nasal, put it in a container, you're done for the week. That's it. You're done. It's that simple. So what happens is they swab themselves, goes in the pooled pod testing, it gets sampled. If there's nothing positive, you're done. If there is something positive, then those students that are in that pool get retested by our person that we hire at school. They don't have to quarantine and go, it's done at school. We make arrangements to make that happen. And that would be the rapid test. Again, it's not something that's very invasive. It's something that people have been going through all along. So what are the benefits? And this is where I want to take a moment and bore you with a couple of words. So the administrators are going to have an administrative retreat on the 17th. We just had it with the administrators. We talked about the year. We talked about setting goals for the following year. We talked about our summer administrative retreat. One of the things that we've been talking about is accelerated learning. So part of why we're doing this is because of this accelerated learning piece. They're going to get an article by Hattie, Fisher, and Frey, Reinvesting and Rebounding, where the evidence points for accelerated learning. There are points in here, and I just want to bore you with one little piece. The threshold for what is worth it. If you're going to do something, invest in it, and you expect some results, what's the threshold? So the average of all effect sizes is 0.40, which roughly equates to 1 year's worth of learning over 1 school year, thus influences approaches, strategies, and actions with an effect size of greater than 0.40 indicates that the potential to learn at a rate greater than expected from 1 year's worth of formal schooling. That is, to accelerate learning above the expected. 0.40. Then there's a whole list of strategies. It probably should come to no surprise that the strategy that's listed as 1.09, which is much greater than the 0.40, is the RTI MTSS process. We call it something different, but that process begins with high-quality instruction, universal screening of all children in the general education classroom, which is Tier 1. What that means in English is the teachers are the most important component to all of this. That's Tier 1. Teachers are the most important. Second, struggling learners are provided with interventions at increasing levels of intensity to accelerate their rate of learning. Those not making the progress and are provided with increasingly intensive instruction, usually in small groups. Tier 2, you're going to hear about that at the elementary school, what that could look like. If still no progress, then students receive individualized intensive interventions and target the students' skill deficiencies. Okay. Other strategies, obviously, a classroom discussion, ranked very high, 0.82, and that's not the teacher speaking to the kids. That involves giving the students an opportunity to have conversations with each other. Reciprocal teaching, 0.74. Everything that has the top numbers attached to it, the majority has to do with quality teaching. No surprise. Hang on to that just for a second. So, the benefits. Best educational option, it allows our teachers to teach our students on site every day. If you recall, when we did the other presentation to you, it required hiring of 4 additional teachers. One of the things that Jay pointed out, very 100% on target, was who are you going to find? Okay, great question, because everybody's looking for them. So I don't care how small your class is, you put an ineffective teacher with 5 students or 10 students, and you're going to get ineffective results. You put an effective teacher with 10 students or 19 students, and then you provide support, you're still going to get some results. So this plan allows us to use our teachers. It allows for strategic placement of interventionists where most appropriate with specific focus in mind. Again, I'm going to point to Erica because you're going to hear about that in her plan. Now this last bullet is and it isn't important to the academic piece of it. But in the long term, it could be. Even though I say it's the least expensive option, this option that you're going to see tonight is still $1.2 million, roughly, out of ESSER funds. But, I say 1.2, 1.6, because you have a little over $1 million in the first year, $600,000 in the second year, because some of the supports that you need in the first year, you may not need in the second year. So that's going to leave us with some funds, perhaps with enough to consider adding on to an elementary school building which is in dire need of space. That would be a long-term benefit for us and for you to consider. So with that, Erica is up to talk about the elementary school.
Right. So this slide shows the positions that we're looking at adding with the ESSER funds for next year in particular. So super subs. So this year we were able to utilize super subs, subs that we had each day, that we knew were consistent, we knew were going to be there every day. As we know, getting substitutes can be a challenge. By having these super subs, we can count on each day. It makes planning and consistency easier. It also helps that these people become familiar with our building, the people in our building, and how our building runs. Remote teacher. We know that having a remote option is going to be important for us, but our goal is obviously to have as many students back in person as we can have. So we would look at, we have been looking at systems like courseware or other things we can find that are age appropriate, because it's different in high school and junior high than it is for K to 6. And we would need to have a teacher who would oversee any remote program. So that would be that person. We believe that it'll be a good balance of continued need to have a remote while also putting our resources into our in-person learning as well. You'll see that we're requesting 4 additional EdTech 3s. This is for that additional support that Peter talked about. We're looking at a few different ways in which we would use these people, but K-2, we would look at using more of a push-in model so that they would be in the classroom during those areas like literacy and math time, working with the teacher, where the teacher might be meeting with their small group and the educational technician would be meeting with their small group. So instead of a student getting just 1 direct intervention with a teacher, they would be getting 2 during, for instance, a workshop literacy time. So that is one of the ways we are going to utilize these EdTechs to provide more support to accelerate students. These educational technicians will participate in professional development and planning alongside with our current support and instructional staff. And our goal is that with this additional support, it will help us to address the post-pandemic learning needs of our students. So the assistant principal that we're requesting this. We do have an additional 85 students that will be coming into our building, and although I know that was originally the plan, we do have to also consider the fact that you're adding that in after a year and a half of a pandemic. So due to COVID, there is a greater concern for social emotional challenges that we would need support for behavior. And by giving students proactive attention, that's one of the reasons we're requesting this. It's a lot easier for us to build relationships and rapport than it is to address behaviors as they come up. So by having 2 assistant principals, it would allow 1 to focus on pre-K through 2nd grade and 1 to focus on grades 3 through 6. They would have time to build relationships with students so that when they are struggling, both the student and the assistant principal are known to each other. We know that relationships are extremely important. They would be able to provide students with a check-in, check-out. And if you know anything about positive behavioral supports, PBIS, that's one tool that we use as an intervention where the student checks in with an adult. In this case, last year it was me as the assistant principal. It would be these 2 assistant principals next year. They check in the morning. They have particular goals that the students are working on. Throughout the day, the student has a paper. They check in with their teacher, and at the end of the day, they check out to reflect on how did you do. It's one tool that we can use, and again, it will be a lot trickier for us to use it when we have limited resources. If we add this additional resource, I think you will see a positive benefit from it. So since the assistant principals would have smaller groups to focus on, they would have the opportunity to reach out to families where attendance may be an issue proactively to support them to get students in school. I could go on about the proactive things we would be able to do with 3 administrators in the building to help address the post-pandemic needs of families. There would be a long list, but I know we're trying to keep this meeting short as possible. With all the students being in the building, behaviors will increase back to post-pandemic numbers. One of the benefits, if there are any from this really crazy year, is that we have seen, I believe due to smaller class sizes and kids being spaced out, a decrease in behavior concerns and referrals to the office. But when I went back and I looked at the numbers for the last few years, it became very worrisome to me that we were going to have all of these kids back. They were all going to be in each other's space a lot more than they had been previously. They're probably going to be struggling with this transition back to every day. And so really want to be able to address those needs, again, proactively. So by adding more students and the COVID impact, it'll make it so we're not able to do other things. We want to create a school that is proactive and not reactive. And in order to do that, we need to have the appropriate support in place. And an additional assistant principal will help us with that goal. There's a greater need to focus on instruction, supervision, programming, and professional development due to COVID. It's one of the things we talked about, is being able to support teachers, support kids. Currently, there isn't enough time to make instruction, supervision, and programming the priority as we're oftentimes focused on short-term fires, if you will, instead of long-term planning for rigorous instruction. With the addition of this AP, I would be able to focus more of my time to look at things that are vital for our success in terms of instruction. As a school, we would be able to focus on that and our ability to make sure that the last 1.5 years have as little a long-term impact on academics as possible. Our goal with this position is that we have all of our pre-K through 6 students back in the building while providing the students and staff with the support they need to be successful, both academically and addressing social emotional needs.
Thanks, Sarah. Jason.
I'll jump down to the third bullet point. Something you've heard me talk a lot about this year was the mental, emotional, social development of the middle school child. So one of our requests, this has been ongoing, is the social worker to address those needs. Our KBH worker, our school counselor, and our social workers are maxed out, which means they're not taking any more students. So we're anticipating a great need for that. And there is no stereotype for these type of children. It's not students that we typically consider just at risk with grades or family. It's across the board. So we feel like it's a pretty important goal. They would address social emotional learning, knowledge in areas of child abuse and neglect, substance abuse. We've seen the rise since the pandemic with families in that area. Knowledge of poverty dynamics and oppression, experience working with individuals who have experienced trauma. Our goal is to utilize this person potentially in our UA, Unified Arts rotation, so that all students would have access to some form of curriculum to meet the needs of the middle school child. If you've ever had a middle school student come through, which I think all of you or most of you have, it's a very difficult time of development under normal, quote, normal circumstances. So we're anticipating as we return, much to what Erica just alluded to, not only discipline problems, but a lot of mental health needs. So that would address many of our student population, not just a set group. The one teacher would oversee the courseware. We talked a little bit about courseware. Previously, we talked about it being a 6 through 12 programming. Chad and I had met with the gentleman in the presentation. Other duties, so wouldn't necessarily, and again, this would be predicated on how many remote learners we have next year. I'm trying to get an informal survey as today students began returning laptops, and they'll continue tomorrow. Just having conversations with the ones that I see and saying, hey, where do you think you're going to be at? So far, most of the conversations I've had, families or the students said, no, we want to return to in-person learning. We do understand that that may not be the case for all, so we need some kind of plan. So that one teacher would be responsible for overseeing that courseware, depending on numbers. Other duties would be assisting with the accelerated learning that Peter had talked about. So we're fortunate at the middle school, we have specialists. We have a math teacher. So this person could be an interventionist, that tier model that Peter alluded to, where we can use DRA testing. We can do other means of assessing students in math and pick pods to have this person work with those groupings throughout the school year, so be creative with that. Would be remote check-ins through the courseware, potential duties as needed. We're not sure what the lunch, breakfast, those type of staff, what that would entail depending on the 6-foot distance and such, and sharing space with Chad and his staff. This position could be built into our schedule as I don't really want to call it a study hall, because when you think study hall, it's sit and oftentimes study independently. So it's going to be a more formal type of learning opportunity. Again, used as an interventionist and used with small groups with screening, which I just alluded to. That's all. We've got a few super subs Chad will probably talk about as well. We had 2 super subs this year. We ended up finding one that was in the building every single day. We used them for lunch duty, covering teachers. I think I shared with you a couple months ago, we went, I think it was 58 days and we were never fully staffed. Now, granted, we'll have the vaccine with our staff next year, so hopefully that won't be as problematic. But the super sub was utilized to capacity, so we'll have some shared super subs as well.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
So to talk about the super subs, since that's kind of where Jason just ended. So our super subs are our subs who come in every single day, and they're flexible. They can be pushed in any direction. Sometimes they're covering 3 different teachers within the day. So block 1, I may be in for Nate. Block 2, I may be in for John, and block 3, I may be in for Hillary. And sometimes it's 4. Sometimes it's going to Jason's building. Sometimes it's in my building. Between the 2 buildings, and we would meet quite frequently in the morning. I say we. It's usually Jane talking to Jason to arrange for what the sub coverage is between both buildings. So having 3, which is exactly what we had this year, going into next year is going to be so vital to keeping everything going. You probably heard me say at a meeting earlier this year that there was a day we had 9 staff members out. COVID related, they were put on quarantine, or, kids were, so there were 9 kids. We did not shut down school that day. And that's for 2 reasons. Two reasons. 2 reasons. One is the 3 super subs that we have. The other one is the willingness for teachers to step up and cover a classroom on a prep period, do whatever they have to do. So that's really vital for us coming back to school full time. EdTech 3 for academic support. We've always had some version of academic support, whether it's the academic support lab. We switched things to academic support specialist a few years ago. In an effort to try to save money a few years ago, we ended up having a half-time person in the media center, and the other half-time she was the academic support specialist. Over time, that has, just because of budget reasons, has kind of gone away. I am putting back in for that using COVID funds, because that is absolutely going to be a need. And the other 2 buildings talked about emotional support for students. We have 2 good school counselors, sorry. Right now, they're handling a lot of that academic support, trying to get things lined up without really having that extra body that they can say, hey, Nate, can you work with little Chad? He's really struggling. Can you provide this extra assistance? So we've got to try to piecemeal things and change teacher schedules, or say, hey, you have a study hall, but I know, could you just work with little Chad right now? It's not as easy. So there's a lot of conversations about trying to find that support. So having this person that we can just know that we can put little Chad with Nate, and Nate's going to take care of little Chad, is going to be huge, and take that pressure off of the guidance counselor or school counselor. Sorry. Jason talked a little bit about courseware, but that's the avenue that we're looking at to offer our remote learning. I think I said this at the last meeting. Forgive me if I didn't, but having teachers have to teach remotely while they're teaching live, I think takes a little bit away from the kids who are live and the kids who are remote. You can't do both 100%. You got to give a little bit to each. Our teachers have done a fantastic job this year getting ready for remote learning and providing remote learning, but we've got to look at a different option for the students, and especially for the staff as well, for longevity, I guess I want to say. I'm at the end of building, I say me, Mr. McNeil, Ms. Marin, and I are at the end of building the schedule. I think last time we presented, I had an extra teacher built in to run the program. I've looked at the schedule and said, okay, if we have, let's say, 80 kids and I need this much of a teacher, I have that person on staff, and I can take away some teaching assignments or add to it based on the number of kids who sign up for remote learning. So we kind of built a flexibility within the schedule using staff that we already have on. One of the things that we know is our remote learners need to be tied to the school, and having a social emotional learning piece that's tied to the remote learners so that they don't feel like they're out in cyberspace and nobody cares about them. Having somebody who can constantly check in with them is one of the duties that's going to be put on one of the staff members at the high school. And then some other things that we're doing that's not going to cost us any money is looking at academic remediation and credit recovery within the school year, and trying to develop times where, you know, it may be using courseware, it may be using some of the assignments that a teacher might have had on Google Classroom, depending on what the need of the student is, right? So if the student failed for the year with a 64, they need to get to a 65. There may be one or two assignments that the teacher's like, hey, if we do this unit over again, we can get you up to passing, just like we would have done during summer school. If a kid got a 30, obviously that gap is a lot more, and we might be able to tailor a courseware course for that student to do over the course of the year to kind of help them. That's one of the great things about courseware. We can tailor it to what the need of each individual kid is, and it doesn't have to be a whole classroom. But I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Jennifer, are you with us online? Can you see that?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So for Winslow Special Education, we are looking to have one teacher specific to the special education remote instruction. And so this would be to support the students that are choosing to do courseware, but also receive some services. So this person would help with accommodations and modifications, as well as provide SDI time for those students that are successful remote learners. Also an EdTech 3 at the elementary school, and this is to target instruction in smaller groups in our resource room setting. And then we have a teacher at the elementary school, which this is a currently we're using this position to make the old junior high work, and we would like to keep this particular person on to provide some smaller groups for our students with significant needs as they transition back from this hybrid setup this school year.
Thank you, Jennifer. So then there's a couple other pieces that are up there. District needs. We talked about pool testing. So obviously we want to hire somebody who's going to do the pool testing, because it takes an individual to collect, to send the specimens off, to record. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork that's going to be involved in that particular piece. And then an additional nurse. And the reason for an additional nurse is that you're going to have all of your students back with all of the regular issues that we have. And in addition, you're also going to have to continue to do the contact tracing, which is, again, falling on the shoulders of the nurses. So COVID is not going to go away between now and next fall. You're still going to have COVID cases. You're still going to do contact tracing. That's still going to be a part of it. So with that, here we come with current trends. And this is where I need your help. And it's going to take a village for this. So here's the thinking. We have fewer cases every day. You know, they have the little bubbles here and there, little bubbles here and there. The other day we had like 30, I don't know, 39 or something, 43 something. And it spiked a little bit to 60, drops down. So we have fewer cases overall. They're declining. The restrictions have been eased in the private sector. So John made a comment about this before the meeting started. He was just chatting with somebody and made the comment. And he's right. In the private sector, you can go to a restaurant. You don't wear a mask. You can if you want to. They've recommended if you haven't been vaccinated. You can go to a store. So things in the private sector have been relaxed. Things in schools have not, because the younger students still cannot be vaccinated. That's one of the pieces to that. Even though the transmissions are not happening in school like they are in the community. We have staff who have been vaccinated. Chad, I think, told me 92% of his staff have been vaccinated at this point. I'm not sure what it is in the other schools, but Chad said 92% of his staff. We now have students who are starting to get vaccinated. And I think that 26% of our kids is correct. And now we also have the opportunity to do the pool testing, which is another tool in our toolbox to keep kids safe and to participate in a mitigation strategy that will allow our kids to come back. So those are the trends. So a reasonable, prudent person would say, this looks like it's going in the right way. That's what we're saying. So what's the unknown? What will the summer bring in terms of a potential variant? I mean, you might say, you know, Peter, you're over worrying about things here, you know, but that's my job, is to worry about things, you know. So I got to put it out there. We don't know. We don't know. They may bring nothing. You know, what I'm hoping to hear is this. Okay, it's summer. We've learned, because they're asking me all the time, are you running a vaccination clinic? I say yes. Check off the box for Winslow. Every superintendent in the state's being asked these questions. I'm thinking somebody's doing some metrics and they're saying, okay, based on the number of people who are participating in vaccinations, based on the number of people who are participating in pool testing, we can say that students in junior high, high school, you don't need to worry about pool testing because of the amount of kids have been vaccinated. So just worry about it at the elementary school. I don't know, but I'm thinking that that's a possibility. So we don't know what's going to happen. So if you flip ahead one more, Michelle, we get to the point where questions from you folks about all of this, and your blessing to say, go ahead with this plan, with the pool testing, or, you know what, we kind of like the other plan you kind of presented at us with the use of the old junior high, and let's go that route. But we kind of need your blessing, based on what you've heard and why. And I also want to say something. I want to commend the administrators. You know, I threw an article at you tonight, and these guys didn't know I was going to throw this article at them, but we've been talking about this stuff. There's a direct correlation with every component of the plan that they stuck up there, whether it's a social worker, the use of our teachers. Special education, by the way, was 0.80, and I didn't mention that, but that's up there. So we're adding the special ed, the interventionists to push in, and not just to sit there in the classroom and watch Amanda and say, hey, how you doing today, Amanda? That's not what we mean by an interventionist. The interventionist is going to get direction from either the title person or the math person or from Erica saying, this is what we need, based on an assessment, based on here's what we're seeing, this is what you need to work on. That's how you're going to accelerate kids. And not just flounder. That's what this plan is intended to do, we hope. So the other plan, of course, requires 4 teachers, but they're not our teachers. Questions? Earl.
30% of the student population, is that figured, and this might be a question guidance might not be out there. Is that on a daily basis that's agreed to it, an aggregate at the start of the year, a weekly basis? How is that 30% figure? And then what happens as that 30% goes up? Do you pick different people every week?
Great question. 30% is the threshold. You can't go below it. We would love to see 70%.
Okay.
Because the higher that threshold, the safer you are. Whoever says, yes, I do, to doing this, will do the test once a week the entire year until they say we no longer need to do it. So let me give you an example. Elementary school, wherever they decide to do it. Let's say the pool is the classroom, because in the elementary school, they stick together. So the pool becomes the classroom. You get 15 kids, 17 kids, whatever, they do the test, sends off, everything's okay, fine, they're done for the week. Next week, they do it again, Monday, whatever. one person gets positive, so then everybody in that pool needs to take the rapid test to find out who it is. Joel is the person who's positive. Joel has to quarantine, just like he does this year. Everybody else who's doing the pool testing does not have to quarantine. So if you got 10 kids doing it, they don't have to quarantine. The other 4 who aren't doing it do need to quarantine. So those kids will be asked to go home again for 10 days like they are this year. So it's to your advantage to say, get involved with the pool testing, because if you're pool testing, we are monitoring you on a weekly basis, just trying to catch and see if you're sick. Jump ahead to the high school, because this one gets a little bit trickier, because you're sitting there, if you're like me, you're thinking, okay, but the high school kids are all over the place. How does that work? So we're all in the same homeroom. It's Monday. We're in homeroom. We do the pool testing. We're on one big homeroom. Chad goes off to one class. Al goes off to another class. Jason goes off to another class. We do the pool testing Monday. Whoops, we got a positive in here. What's going on with that? All right. It's Chad. Chad's got the virus. Chad has to leave, has to quarantine. Now we got to contact trace for everyone that Chad's been around, just like we did this year. Same thing. We got to do the same thing. That's why we need the extra nurse. So we'll contact tracing for all these people. But, Joel, you're a direct contact to Chad. Oh, but wait, in our database, you're doing pool testing. You can stay in school, Joel. We don't have to quarantine you and kick you off. John, we're contact. You're a direct contact. But John, you've been vaccinated. John, you can stay in school. You're vaccinated. Hillary, we're doing the contact tracing, and we've noticed that when you haven't been vaccinated and you're not doing the pool testing, I'm sorry, Hillary, but you've got to quarantine. That's how this would work. So right then and there, I've kept him in school, and unfortunately Hillary couldn't, because she's not involved in any of the 2 things that could have. So is it the parents' advantage to get vaccinated? Absolutely. Is it to the parents' advantage to go to pool testing room? Absolutely. Is it to our advantage? Absolutely. Because we're keeping everybody safer. So that's how that would work. I don't know if I answered your question. It's once a week. It's everybody who's involved. It's not random. We don't say, Joel, it's you this week, John, it's next week. It's everybody involved does it.
So if you get 50% of the population, it's all 50%.
Absolutely.
And then if it goes up in 2 months to 60%, it's all 60%.
Even better.
Okay, that's a lot more.
Even better.
That's a lot more user friendly.
And I think once parents find out that Joel can stay in school but Hillary can't, they're going to say, hey, Joel, I'm going to swab your nose. Come on.
Get your ass to the clinic and get shot.
John.
One of the statements you said was transmissions aren't happening. I'd like to see figures either from the governor, Department of Education, CDC, someone, official figures on a couple facts. Transmissions, deaths, school-age children being involved, state and local. Is that available, or is that something that they are just not sharing with us, or just maybe we haven't seen it and it's out there, just hasn't been collected? Or
I'm not sure, John. If you could.
Because if the transmission / death rate is 0.00005, I mean, there gets to be a point, and I'm not saying it's there, I'm just saying if it gets to the point where there's so few cases and so few people get sick and no one dies, what is the risk that we're willing to assume? I mean, we're driving to school, there's a risk. There's got to be a level of risk for COVID that equals the same risk for driving or for measles or for other things in life that are risks. It can't be forever that we're worried about COVID if the risk becomes less than, we've had kids this year die in their car, school-age children. What I'm saying is, we have to assume risk in life.
I think the best answer that I can give to your question is that over time, that risk will be mitigate it to a point where we can do what you're saying.
But I'm saying that the state of Maine, either the governor, the Department of Education, or the CDC, someone at the state level should give us numbers for local and state transmission rates, deaths of children. I've heard no one. Now, I could be wrong. I'm going to say this right up front. I don't know.
The first person under the age of 20 died of COVID this week,
First person in 15 months?
under the age of 20.
You owe less than $331,760 on your home, and you haven't missed a single.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, it sounds like a good offer,
But my point is, we've had more kids. So in other words, we've had more kids die in a car accident this year because I know of kids that have died. I specifically know friends who had people die.
Right.
That's unacceptable. I mean, we can't do anything about it probably, but you know what I mean? There is a point at which the risk is no greater than it is to drive to school.
And I think it'll take time, John, before we get to that point where the vaccinations and everything else that we're doing, before they say that risk that you're talking about has been mitigated to that point.
But I'm saying is they have numbers now. They aren't sharing those numbers that I know of. Maybe someone else is getting
Go
these.
to the CDC website, you can find all that information.
About this school
It will
age
say,
children?
it will say, like, what age there are, how many deaths in a certain age category.
So
All you
is
gotta do is go onto the CDC.
is that a presentation we can get from our school nurse, or? I mean, they're probably more tied to this than we are, being school board members, but I would think that'd be vital information to have. What is the real problem? Define the problem before you go and spend millions of dollars to, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, if there is a risk, I'm saying I want to solve the risk and the problem, but if there is no.
That's at the state or the federal level, not at the local level at when.
Okay, but the decision to change the local ordinances for businesses was done by the state level, not federal level.
Well,
The
right, what I'm
governor made
saying,
that
John,
decision.
All I'm saying is having our nurses make a presentation about that doesn't change the state law.
Well, but I know, but we have the information to make a decision. Right now, we're guessing that there's a risk. Because we're told there's a risk, but I haven't heard what the chances are that my kid's gonna be sick or die or.
Right. See, we have the information to make a decision, John, because the law, as Chad has pointed out, is the law. Right now, that 3-foot distancing is still there. They haven't removed it.
Okay, but they may remove that at some point.
Well, they will lessen the effect of it if you do certain things such as pool testing. Because they say that one is helpful to negate the other. In other words, if you're doing early mitigation strategies, you hopefully will catch it before you have a bunch of kids who need to. You know, we've been very lucky here, John, very lucky. I mean, I'm sitting at home last night and my wife, who had to retire from her district because having compromised lungs and not being able to work because she was being told that if you get this, you're gonna end up on a ventilator and you could die. So she had to retire early. So that district is she's still connected to it. And last night, 9 o'clock, calls are still coming in. They're getting a case every night. We've been very fortunate here that we're not getting cases all the time. So for us, it might not seem as real as it is, but it's still real. It's still out there. It's still happening. And I don't want to be the district that has the first death. I don't want to be that district. So if the recommendation from the CDC, and this is the law that says this is what you need to do, my recommendation to all of you is we follow the law.
Right.
And we find a way to make this happen so that it's the safest way for our kids and our staff, and it's still educationally sound. I guess the big question for me right now is, with this decision that I'm asking for this evening, is we don't know what fall is going to bring. We're hoping that things continue to improve. So like what you're saying, John, some of these things may even go away.
Right. And I guess my point is, every other decision we're asked to make as a school board, we have the facts ahead of us. And we can look at the budget, we can look at whatever the thing is. We're just being told, okay, do this and it's gonna help. And I agree, this plan, I mean, I wrote down, I'm willing to do this plan but I'm hoping it's not needed. I'm hoping that, but my point is, we need to know facts, not just, oh, you need to do this. You know, why?
So help me understand what you're asking.
I'm saying, I want to know if we're having school-age children, which is what we're concerned with, and staff, if we're having them get sick, if we're having them pass away from COVID.
Yes, kids are getting sick. Kids have gotten COVID. Kids have been home with COVID. No one's
Yes,
gone
but
to the
this-
hospital to the degree to be on a ventilator that I'm aware of.
Right,
But they've been sick, they've had it, yes.
you're saying yes or no, like I'm saying there's stats that we haven't seen.
We have the stats. I can give you the stats from our
Okay,
own
well,
nurses.
that's something I would like to see.
I can give you a whole ream of stats from the numbers of contact tracing we've had to do, from the number of kids who've actually had it, from the number of staff who's actually had it. Those things have happened here in Winslow. Yes, absolutely.
I got several other questions, but I don't want to dominate the conversation.
I've got questions for all of the speakers, so whenever you want to
Sure.
entertain them. Okay, so starting with you. You referenced that more than 30% of respondents in each building. And I don't think we need to go into what percentage and what the response rate was, but I just want to hear that you are confident that if we extrapolated that to the whole building, we'd still hit 30%, because clearly respondents of surveys are more interested than non-respondents. And it may be that the respondents are at a higher rate of saying yes than the overall population in school. So if you're confident that the numbers extrapolate across the building, then that's useful to me. If you feel like it may be marginal when we extrapolate out to the 100%, then we need to be having a more nuanced discussion about options.
When you say extrapolate, you mean, am I confident that by building I've hit 30%?
Yes.
The survey was set up so that buildings would respond and we would be able to see by each building what those numbers were. We've already done that, so yes. So the
Okay.
surveys went to elementary school parents, went to elementary school teachers in that building. I know right now that I've got 30% in that building.
Okay.
Parents and teachers did the same thing for the junior high, same thing for the high school. What I wasn't sure about is, do I have to have consent? Because I don't have consent to move forward with this plan with the state. I contacted the state, had a conversation with the deputy commissioner. Deputy commissioner said to me, you do not need to have consent. You just need to feel confident that you've got the 30%, which I can demonstrate that I have.
Okay, good, thank you. It was mentioned that 27%, I think, of high school students are vaccinated. Having 2 vaccinated high school students myself, I'm wondering, what was the process? They may not have told anybody. If they don't know that there's somebody at school, they should be telling them that they're vaccinated. So I was just wondering what our process is to get a sense of whether 27% is who we happen to know about, or are we collecting pretty solid data on that, so that's a good number.
I think I said 26%.
Okay.
And what's happened with that is we have our nurses tied into the state system.
Okay.
So every time a student has a vaccination, it goes to the state system. They receive that information. They can tell you what we have.
Good, thank you.
My next question ties exactly to that. The 26% is a good number for as early as it is, and I think we're heading in the right direction. But does that include graduating seniors who won't even be here next year? So that, I mean, I think it does, doesn't it? See what I'm saying? That 26%, probably a chunk of that is going to fall off the WHS grid.
It could, John. It could.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I don't think that number's gonna get much higher than that, to be honest with you.
Oh, you don't think it'll grow?
I don't think it's.
And it's early.
It's early.
It's early. That's why I think it will grow.
I think it will grow.
I think it'll grow to close to 50%, especially the older the kid, the more likely.
Well, whether it's that or the pool testing, I mean, I think kids and families have lost enough this past year that they're gonna realize the value in doing one or the other because of what they did lose. So I can't imagine that families wouldn't take advantage of one or the other, pool testing or vaccination.
Yeah.
My opinion. I mean, just to go a little further, while we're kind of on the subject of the numbers, I'll just say, as far as, yes, it's still out there. I mean, in my workplace, we've had as many cases of positives in the past couple of 2-3 weeks of either our employees or their immediate family members that they live with. We've had as much of that in the last couple, 2 or 3 weeks as we've had in the probably past 6 or 8 months. So it's whether, everybody letting their guard down or whatever, our numbers are, are there
Well, I will say,
recently. So, I mean, just saying it's still there and we have to be cautious, and I'm hoping that people, again, continue with.
I will say this in the beginning,
Vaccines.
our elementary school kids were not getting hit as hard as they've been getting hit after vaccination started happening. Then the elementary school that number started to go up. I mean,
As parents are vaccinated, you'd think there'd be less transmission. I mean, maybe that's just common sense. My question regarding the pool testing is the results timing. Is it something that's a fairly fast turnaround for the pool?
It's sent out immediately and they get the results within a few days.
A few days. Okay, so that's gonna affect the effectiveness of the total program.
Correct.
Okay.
If it's anything like the testing that I went through at Thomas, which was twice a week, the results were in within 24 hours.
That's good.
And it was extremely efficient. It was 15 seconds, swab, put it in the test tube. Okay, I'll see you on Thursday.
Jay,
Last one for you, I think.
that'd be great.
Let somebody else get on
I
that.
never hear anything that's the last one from you.
There was a reference made to state leadership, and John was talking about, are we getting information from the State Department of Education? I trust that when you're involved in MSMA activities, that the association is concerned about the fact that over the last dozen years or so, the number of staff at the Maine Department of Education has got to be down by 40%. The amount of staff that's available to the State Department of Education to provide leadership to support superintendents and schools is really significantly impaired. And I think that didn't help us this year. And I hope that some COVID funds can be used and will be used for state leadership. Because I think not only that, there are other things that we could and should be getting from the State Department of Education that they simply can't do anymore, that they have done for decades prior to the last 10 or 12 years. So that's just
I will say that you are 100% right that they're down. There was a tremendous turmoil in that department, tremendous. And I will say this, under the new governor, some of the new people that have been hired, they're actually, when you pick up the phone and you call, they're actually helpful. That hasn't always been the case.
Good.
As you've experienced
Good.
in the past. So it's been much better. It's been much better as of late.
Well, while we're just on that subject real quick, I mean, I get emails from the Maine School Board Association, Maine School Management Association. Do you guys all get those emails as well? You're not getting them?
I don't know.
Because you're fairly new to the board, so it might be you haven't made it onto their list.
I do.
But you're getting them.
I do, yeah.
You're getting them, okay.
So I
So
get it from the education.
I don't know what it takes to get our newer members onto that list.
From both sides.
In the meantime, I guess when I get them, I'll forward them along, but I guess
I mean,
when you get to the point where you
less than
show up
1
on.
month, and so I think I'm not on the regular rotation.
Yeah,
It's pretty
okay.
frequent.
All right, so I just don't want to, I can forward them along, but I just didn't want to bury you with emails that you're already getting, so.
No, I would gladly take it.
Okay, very good.
Jay, do you have questions for others?
Yeah, Erica, just a point of understanding. On your slide, it said 3 super subs folding in 1 for special education. Does that mean 3 plus 1? I'm not sure what the folding in means.
So I originally asked for 2 and special ed asked for 1, so we just put that together.
Okay, so that's 3 total. I just wasn't sure on that.
So, hold on one second.
Please.
Special ed asked for 1 at the elementary school. So is that
Same one?
that's the same one?
Same one.
Yes.
Okay, so the request for a special ed super sub or ed tech.
Yeah, so on the special ed slide, there was a remote teacher, an ed tech 3, and a special ed teacher.
Yep.
So the super sub was on mine.
So it should not have been on hers.
It wasn't
There
on
wasn't
hers.
one on there.
We moved it.
Ed Tech 3 at Winslow
Yeah, that's not super
Elementary
sub.
School.
It's not super sub. We're talking
Okay.
about ed tech.
Okay,
We moved it. That's a good catch, though. We
Because-
moved it earlier.
okay.
Okay, and so Jason,
Yes.
the social worker, which is only for the junior high school, I was glad that Erica mentioned PBIS because positive behavioral interventions and supports was in the question I was writing for you, Erica, and then you answered it, so thank you. The social worker seems like a person who might have a good skill set to be providing or certainly supporting a PBIS program at the junior high. So I was just wondering, since it came up at the elementary school, it didn't come up at the middle school, at the junior high school, my apologies. If you do have a PBIS program, and if so, is the social worker somebody who would be contributing to that?
We do have a PBIS program. Hadn't given much thought to include that person, but you're spot on. Some of the conversations I've had with Audrey Shah, our clinical director, was what I presented, presenting this person maybe in curriculum format, instructing all the kids in that UA, offering that one-to-one supports with our students that we don't have anybody for right now to see. We could include them in leadership roles and PBIS committees.
Okay, good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chad, I share your concerns about little Chad. There you are. Little Chad is very important.
A lot of people have concerns about little Chad.
When you reference credit recovery is clearly getting a student to get far enough along in a curriculum to get credit. That's what it's about. It's not about necessarily trying to get A's. It's about getting enough to get the credit. So the question is, if you're talking about in your program, getting students up to the minimum for credit, will you be able to help any students who significantly underperformed but may have passed? They may have gotten the credit, but they may not be getting the achievement that is going to help them get into the post-secondary options or to help them get into a course for which that was a prerequisite.
And that's where the academic support specialists can come in and help out and see. And if, like, let's say, let's use little Chad, let's pick on him some more. So little Chad's in, let's say, has moved on to honors pre-calc. He was in honors algebra 2. And the honors pre-calc teacher like, you know what, you're missing these couple of things that would really get you there. Can work with little Chad and the academic support specialist, say, hey, can we work on these skills here? We could also even use courseware and say, hey, if we can tailor this one unit to get little Chad caught up, we can do it. And if little Chad's in honors pre-calc, then he's probably got a pretty good handle on a lot of skills and can work on that. So there's a lot of different supports as well that we can use. Absolutely,
Okay,
great
thank
question.
Jennifer, are you still there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. You used a term I just wasn't familiar with. You referred to SDI time, and I'm not familiar with that term. Maybe I misunderstood it. Could you explain what that is?
Yes, it's specially designed instruction. So it's the time that students might receive English language arts instruction or math instruction. It's a time typically that they spend outside of the classroom getting direct instruction.
Okay, thank you. I just was not familiar with that acronym. So the last question goes back to the positive interventions and supports at the elementary school. I have no objection to the idea of an assistant principal to support that, but I would just offer that depending on the skill sets of the people involved, you may be able to find that two ed tech 2s that are the right people could implement a really, really effective PBIS program, because I don't believe you would need to be an Ed Tech 3 for that. You would have somebody else that's designing the instruction, which is the critical difference. So when you look at it from a budgetary standpoint, Peter, and from an availability of staff, I would just encourage you to think about, if you want an administrator, that's fine. If you can't find the right administrator, think about whether or not there are other allocations of personnel or other certifications that if you find the right people, you may be able to get that job done in a different way. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, and that's a really good suggestion, Jay, because you're trying to get support for the kids. The biggest thing for us right now is it's almost like starting over in some ways, you know? We've been in this weird situation now for over a year. And so we have everybody back next year. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about at our leadership retreat. What is it that we need to think about? Because we're going to have everybody back. And it's going to be a transition to come back. So what are some of the things that we said prior to COVID were the most important things that we should be doing? And that was instruction. And how do we instruct our kids in instructional strategies, instructional practices? Erica can't even begin to do that part of her job if she's concerned about worrying about some of the additional things that are going to come back when everybody's back in the building. And looking at the way she's broken it down, by one assistant principal would kind of carry these duties and the others would kind of carry that duty, would help, I think, in the transition of getting things back smoothly so that we are operating under the guidelines that we feel we should be operating under in order to provide support for our teachers, whether it be in instruction or some of those other areas.
I guess one thing I'd say on that front, I mean, when we were going from a 3-building campus to 2, during that transition year, we had talked about additional administrative support, knowing that there was going to be various hurdles that were going to come up in that transition year. And really, quite honestly, this is a transition year where additional administrative support has some sense to carry on with that same vein. It's just, we haven't actually occupied both of those buildings the way we had intended with, along with the additional burdens of coming back from a pandemic. So I guess I'd throw my 2 cents worth in on that. Obviously, my job as a manager, I mean, sometimes you spend so much time on, this is my life, on the little things that the fires of the day that you don't get to do the long-term planning, which is crucial. And so I entirely understand that problem. So I had a couple questions. I don't know where you.
Yeah, I've got 2.
Keep going.
Hopefully they'll be really easy. What's the process you're going to use to vet whoever's going to be the COVID screener?
We have reached out to the nurses to help us develop an ad along with a job description of what these people would need to do. And so we're in the process of making that happen right now, Earl. And with your blessing this evening, we will advertise on the weekend what that looks like. But they're providing the input for us, what we should be looking for
And that'll
an
be
individual.
And that'll
At least
be
in
covered
Ed
by
Tech
ESSER funds?
At least in Ed Tech 3. And I'm sorry?
And that'll be covered by ESSER funds?
Everything you saw on that screen tonight is all covered by ESSER funds.
And then my only other question is, what's going to be the criteria for remote learning? Because I would hope that it's not simply, I don't want to go to school, I like being at home, I want to stay remote. I'm hoping that there is good concrete requirements, the autoimmune deficiency, compromised parent or sibling, something along those lines. It just can't be an option. It has to be a requirement.
Yeah, well, I think even more important than that is having supports in place to make sure that plans can be developed for somebody who's not being successful. And having a teacher that can be that remote learning mentor provides for that assistance to make sure that even if a kid is remote, that there are supports put in place to make sure that they don't lose contact.
Right, but, and I understand that, and I completely agree with that. My question is, what's the criteria that puts that kid in the remote status?
I think there's an application, there's an application process, and it starts with conversations. And if, let's say, little Chad again, wasn't successful this year, okay, what supports are in place? Because this is what it takes to be a successful remote learner, and here's what it takes from the student side, from the parent side. And if you weren't successful this year, what supports are going to be in place outside of the school, between home, to make this kid successful?
So I think, following up, if I may, I think part of Rose' question is, what's the line between a remote learner and a homeschool student? And
yeah,
I think that's where it gets a little fuzzy.
It does get fuzzy, and different school districts have done different things. So right now, if you look at some of the articles that are out nationally, you've got this pendulum swing from absolutely we're not offering anything to we're taking this as an opportunity to move forward and provide other opportunities for our kids. I'd say we're someplace in here. We're not encouraging remote learning, so don't think that we are, because we feel that, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, we feel that the best opportunities that we have for our kids are in-class, in-person learning, for all of the other pieces that go along with that. However, we also understand that some families, some students right now are still not going to be comfortable coming to school still in this. So we will be offering that option for them. In tomorrow's administrative team meeting, we need to look at a survey. We had started to talk about criteria. Some of the pros and cons of criteria. Some school districts are saying you have to demonstrate some medical condition in order to do remote learning. I think that's discriminatory, because it shouldn't just be because you've got a medical condition. Some school districts, and I like this idea of putting an information out to the parents saying, you need to write us a letter why you think your child would do well with remote learning. If they put the effort and time into putting a letter together to do that, I think that could be one of the criteria.
That's just as discriminatory though, because that speaks to the parent's ability to communicate
that's
through the written word.
Yep.
Once the vaccine becomes a fully approved vaccine for everybody, I think we need to visit that as making it a mandatory requirement, so that way it falls along the lines of the other mandatory shots and vaccinations that children have to get. I mean, we require children to be vaccinated against a number of things in order to come to
But
our
the
school.
state requires that, not us.
Right.
Well, we have
That's
to
what
follow
we don't wanna
state
get
law,
involved.
yes.
Right. So I think it might be to your point that the state would be looking at whether or not they make it a requirement, I guess is the point I think. I don't know if we want to go down that road.
And I think to go back to the idea of you have to have a compromised immune system or something like that. Pre-COVID, we have had students who choose to go to a virtual high school because of the anxiety that it takes to come into a building with 500 strange-looking people every day.
Deal with them daily.
Right?
I deal with them daily.
If this provides us an opportunity to keep them connected to Winslow High School, and we can do it that way, I think the opportunity to have a virtual program can expand upon what we're potentially going to starting out really low. And then if it helps us keep kids connected to Winslow and we don't lose them to a main charter school or something like that, then it's going to support. But we've got to have the support in place to support them doing that.
And I agree.
Lose them in
I
cyberspace.
agree completely with that as far as the supports. I just would hate to see our numbers pre-COVID be 10 students or 3% of our population in that area that you described, and all of a sudden watch that spike to 15 or 18% of our population. That would be very questionable.
Here's
from
the
my
thing,
perspective.
Earl, and I loved your question because I think it was an appropriate time and point. But the thing that you didn't mention in your question that I've heard from all these people is the mental state of the students and parents who assume responsibility for their kid. Are they comfortable with it? And that's where I could support remote learning, even though I'm hoping they can overcome that. It is a process, and I don't think it's going to be as fast as we'd like to see. And that's why I'm willing to support this pool testing, because I can see that becoming making it more comfortable for a parent at home to go, okay, well, I kind of trust this a little more because of that program.
And I liken the pool testing to seatbelts. You used automobiles. Well, we probably would have a lot more fatalities amongst young people if we didn't have things like seatbelts, like airbags, like state mandated inspections, all of those other safety related things that have been added. That's what pool testing is. That's what vaccination is. That's what contact tracing are. Those are those safety mechanisms that are getting built into the system to mitigate the risk.
You know, Earl, your question is something, and I'll be totally honest with you. Not that I never not honest with you, but we're struggling with that. And the reason that we're struggling with it is because we feel we have to have some type of criteria that, because of the reason that you just mentioned, because that 10%, let's say you had 5% prior to COVID and then after you got 15. We want to make sure that within that 15%, we don't have people choosing remote just to not come to school, which we had this year, and we know that. Some of them would have been students who don't do well in school, that hate school, and this was a way out. That is something we need to, and I don't know how to find that fine line.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Right.
I don't know.
And that's where we're at, is what are the guidelines that we're gonna look at, the criteria that we're gonna put together to make that happen. We're struggling with that.
I just hope that we come together as a group, we'll make a better decision than an individual.
Right.
Well, let me ask this question on the front. I'm assuming at this point, the state is still allowing us, from a practical standpoint, budgets and state reimbursements and all those things, the state is still, our student count population is going to include these remote kids. The criteria, like for example, homeschool kids, we don't get counted in our numbers regarding reimbursement and all those other things. This year they kept to the previous year's numbers, is my understanding. But come October this year, when they do the count, are they gonna count these remote kids?
If they're remote, they will count as your student. If they're being homeschooled, they will not count unless they're participating in one or two things in your building.
Okay. So as long as we're delivering curriculum, we can count them.
Correct.
And such. And I'm presuming at some point the state's gonna tighten up on that as we get further down the road with the COVID, as far as what makes because they've relaxed it, but I assume they're gonna go back to where they were at some point. But right now, that's not the case, and I guess that's all we need to worry about for this coming school year.
Right. I think we should look at this as an opportunity, not as a curse. But we have to look at it in such a way that it's going to work. And that's the key. Where's that fine line? So that it works for all of us.
My last question was over the budget, this pool testing / all these positions that we're being told about. It's being paid by the COVID funds, you just said, or whatever the word.
Just to clarify one thing, the pool testing is still being paid for by the state. It's not coming out of our ESSA funds.
Okay.
So the pool tester is coming out of our ESSA funds. The nurses are ESSA funds. But the actual testing, the sending the stuff away, the materials, That's the,
Hiring all those people that we just mentioned
that's
is
us,
not local budget.
correct.
Question, does the CDC, whoever makes the changes, say a change is announced 3/4 of the way through the year, and they say, well, okay, you no longer need those positions, or you no longer am gonna get any more funds. Are we just gonna terminate those people, or are we gonna, maybe this is too early to discuss?
I think the commitment, because it's not just Maine, it's the entire country, the commitment is to 2023. And so you have school districts across this country that are building like crazy right now, because that's one of the biggest uses of these funds, is to build under the guidance of you're creating more space so that in the event you ever had another pandemic, you'd be prepared. So people are building like crazy. They're gonna need a couple of years to build. So I don't see the funds going away. I think they're there for you to find a way to creatively use them.
But my question is leading to the future budgets, because it sounds like those positions could be important to have, but if all of a sudden they flip the switch and say, okay, now you gotta pay for that yourself.
All of
You
these
know-
people who are being hired in these positions, John, we're being transparent with them from the get-go and say, this is a 2-year position, this is a 1-year position. They know what they're getting into when we do this.
Okay.
Let me ask this from another practical question. Since we're self-insured for unemployment, things like that, in 2 years, when these people they're terminated, are we going to be getting into a unemployment liability? Because
You could,
we're our employees no matter how we paid for them.
you could.
So just might be a conversation with the state about such things, on how they consider those things in unemployment insurance, which is a state determined program.
Yeah, and their
So-
compensation includes healthcare and all these other things that we have negotiated, so.
It includes, right, it's a regular package. But that would be the case for everybody who's
Right.
hiring extra people.
So a couple questions I had. The ESSER funds obviously cover all these, and you said it was declining from 1 year to the next, because we presume that some of those requirements would decline.
We're a little over $1 million in the first year and a little over 600,000 in the second year if we follow the draft plan that we've put together right now.
And your draft plan that some of these positions would decline in the second year.
Right.
Okay. You mentioned early on about the 6-foot lunch requirement still remaining as of now.
Tomorrow, during the AT meeting, on the agenda that I just added is, we're gonna figure out the 6-foot lunch piece. We have to figure that out. That's the last remaining piece of this puzzle. And we need to get creative with that. Scheduling is gonna come into play, obviously. Using every inch of space is gonna come into play. It might require Shelley and I had a conversation today, we were talking about a bunch of different things and thinking about, long tables versus desks. Can you get more kids in a certain section if you did that? So there's just all kinds of things that we need to discuss in terms of some options.
So
we
phys ed
allowed to-
classes during the lunch periods, more lunch periods, all those sorts of things.
All those sorts of things.
You can use the gym, for example, lunch spaces.
What you didn't see on there is a portable. We had some preliminary conversations of do we need to put a portable in at the high schools, that the kids walk out of that dining room into a portable to eat. The question becomes, how many kids can you put in a portable? Does that really help us with the cost? I mean, those are all the things we need
You gotta
to.
heat it, you got to.
Right.
Well, it could all be solved though
Somebody's got to monitor it. because
by
not
someone,
enough space.
some person coming down and saying, you can be 3 feet apart.
Correct.
So,
And quite honestly, if if the pool testing is really there, our numbers are great, there might be levels of where we can go with things like that if your experience rate on positivity is really low, that maybe some will get weighed by then, but we got to plan like it isn't. So something I think Eric had mentioned at the last presentation, and it still applies this time, is, and I think Mike Thurston touched on it as well, planning time, particularly at the elementary school, was something that was, I think it was for all schools, but I think the elementary school has kind of always been taking the brunt of some of that sometimes. Are we, with our supports and other hires, are we gonna be able to help in the planning time in the various buildings as needed to get it, back to it where we are supporting these teachers better with that? Is that part of this? I guess I'll look to Erica, I guess, but.
So I just clarify one thing. So they didn't lose planning time. They had specials in their classroom, so they had to leave their work for planning time, but the amount of planning time is the same. But it was a change, and so it was a struggle for the teachers. Next year, we will, because we're doing full testing and the spacing, the 3-foot spacing will go away, we'll be able to have specials back into their spaces. So that shouldn't be an issue for next year.
We're back to where we should be. Very good, thank you. Just thinking another budgetary issue, just thinking long-term, I think the idea of the super subs has worked great. We always have a constant need for subs. I just don't want us to lose sight on where it puts us for subs when we get, so we don't have ESSER funds to pay for subs, and that we're not, if we're paying for all our substitute costs through ESSER funds, just happens to work out that way with our super subs, that we have a smaller budget line item for what would be considered regular subbing, because we've had the super subs that, a year or two down the road when we don't have super subs per se, that our budgetary line items are there to, that because we tend to do year over year and experience in our budgeting, that we have the budget numbers there for our subs in those out years coming forward, because I'd hate to lose our ability to kind of differentiate super subs versus our regular subbing. And quite honestly, maybe in the future, having full-time hired subs is an answer that we haven't, we've had subs that we call on an as-needed basis, but honestly, it's our experience rate is so high that we always need at least 3 people a day in any of our buildings. Maybe it becomes a problem because of specialties in regards to subs or not, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there,
I've seen situations this year where Kyle posts things just to kind of give me a heads up of where they are, because they have had probably, without exaggeration, 13 days, maybe more. You've had 13 days, maybe more, where you've been close to not being able to run because of the way you've had to juggle.
Oh, those might be the only ones that I sent you. I decided to do inbound every day. It's been kind of a remarkable thing, but, in recent weeks, there's been as many as 26 people involved in this subs. That means about half of those are people who are out, about half of those are subs that are in. So our 2 super subs have not covered the entire need that we've had. Your budget line has been spent on regular subs right along. It's been from a variety of things we've had.
Right, well, I'm not disagreeing with, I'm sure, with the experience rate we've had, the subs have been used extensively, and I'm just concerned that when we get back to, we have less absences and quarantines and, staff are back to the normal levels of illness and absence, that we have good, good numbers to verify that. Because I guess I'd go to the point, to go a step further. You've indicated how many days that we barely had the staff we needed to stay open. But I guess I'd also ask the question, going back to pre-COVID, and the idea of super subs, just kind of plant the seed, we don't answer it today, but should we have super subs in our budget, that we've got full-time hires, so we don't have to worry about in the morning who we calling? Because our experience is such that we have at least this many people out a day every day in our 2 buildings, that just looking forward to.
Almost like a utility person.
Right, so you've got to go to, that you've got every day, and they might not know which room they're going in, but instead of this, our history, not saying it will go away, but the history of, you having to deal with in the morning, do I have a sub to cover this class? If you've got X amount of super subs that are on your staff,
There's been very few days, I want to say this, so there's been very few days, I would say less than a half a dozen, less than 6, where I was kind of scratching my head saying, okay, what are we gonna use this super sub for? We had 2. I mean, there was a need.
Well, I'm just thinking pre-COVID, how many days,
We could look at that.
you know, that you had X amount of subs as a starting point of maybe we should have, you know, a super sub on staff going, you know, when we get to the other side of this, I'm just kind of planting the seed for the idea that instead of having to deal with it on a daily basis for every position that we need to fill. Just a thought.
Are Ed Tech threes like a super sub?
No.
No, they don't do the same thing.
One of the things I said to the 2
I
that
didn't
we,
know if the qualifications were.
when I approached folks at the beginning of the school year, said, this is what we're looking for, I used utility infielder. I said, what you're agreeing to is to do anything that you're asked to do when you walk through the door. You might be teaching music special, or you might be ed teching in a behavior room. You're gonna be that wide, and it might happen that you get changed halfway through the day, because in this contact tracing thing that we've been through, it's been staff members who walked through the door in the morning and said, I just got a call from my childcare. They've got a positive case. I got to go home because I don't have any childcare. So all of a sudden now you're pulling, you know, people have been amazing in the way that it's worked. It's kind of hard to describe unless you're right in the middle of it and living it. But it's been a lot of work. It's like putting together, you know, it's like taking the Rubik's Cube and trying to get the colors all on the same page. You're probably right, Peter. Your number, those 12 to 13 days, that's probably an accurate reflection of where we were kind of saying to ourselves, Eric and I, like, you know what, are we gonna have to call Peter and say we don't have enough to run this building today? So.
Well, I was just kind of throwing that out there of an opportunity of what have we learned from this that might be useful when we get to the other side, so.
To your point, Joel, where the point that you're making would be a tremendous benefit. We transferred over to Ready Sub prior to COVID, which was an attempt to get our subs early. The jobs that get pushed out online, people can choose the job. So we made an attempt to address what you're saying. However, even with that, there are mornings when the building principals they can't find somebody. If they had a super sub as a last resort, on those mornings, it'd be one less thing for them to worry about, because they knew they'd have an ace in the hole. To your point, that would be.
I mean, the cost is probably a little higher because now you've got a full-time employee with benefits and such, but there's a flip side to that as well. So you get consistency, they know the system, you know.
And they could probably actually teach instead of be a babysitter.
Right. So there's benefits all the way around. Just a thought we could maybe learn something from this experience that would be helpful going forward. Anybody else got any questions? I guess not seeing any hands, so I figured I'd ask.
Move to accept this plan as presented.
Second.
And we have a second from Jay. Okay, do we have any other discussion?
The only other discussion I would offer is that this is complicated and it's changing, and I think modest adjustments that the administrative team decides are reasonable, that maybe between you, Peter, and Joel do not feel are I would say maybe the word is substantive or substantial. I would include that in my second, if you would, in your motion, that the administration has some latitude as conditions change.
Make the changes you need. Make the changes you feel comfortable making on your own. The others bring to us.
You comfortable with that, Joel?
I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. That's really good.
Because they are developing it as we speak, so yes, there'll be. And obviously, I think we'll be hearing more as it develops, and I'm sure we usually don't have a July meeting, but if we end up having one, or I'm sure we'll be getting emails along the way as things develop. We can call meetings if we need to. And
We can have it at Walmart.
can
Yeah, we don't need to wear masks then.
we? Yeah.
Oh, you're hateful.
Well, we can go sit in our outdoor classroom.
We gotta get John out of here so he can go vote. We need these votes.
Yeah, we do.
We need these
Well,
votes.
all right, so we got a motion, we got a second with the amendment. All right, all in favor? It is unanimous. Very good.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, no, we do have a couple other things.
Yeah, we got an important appointment.
I
Or
kind of
two,
moved
three.
went by it quickly, because we've been putting public comment at the end, so if there's any public listening that want to call in for public comment, you probably want to get down the phone number here quickly. Vote on appointments, we have, Chris Preble is a high school and junior high assistant principal. That would be, replacing the retiring Rick Hensby. Alexander Fontaine is grade 5 teacher, and Jennifer Gagnon is the interim special ed director. I think you're aware of that.
Move to approve as listed.
All right,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor of the appointments as listed? Very good, thank you. We have another B3 to continuing for Nicole Tibbetts. We didn't know if she would be returning this year for another opportunity, but she is. So do I have we didn't just discuss, we ought to vote on that one separately because I didn't include it in the other list,
Right.
so.
Motion to accept and approve.
Second, all right, any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Resignations, Lori Tiles, grade 3 teacher, we thank her for her service, and I assume accepted that resignation. Other business, we have our regular meeting for June 21st scheduled right here. Same time, and I assume we'll have the in-person with the virtual option if you need that. And if there's nothing else, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion, second. Hillary, we'll let you do a motion. You want a second? You want to adjourn?
I will second that right away.
All right. No discussion, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Get out of here if you